Herzlich willkommen, einen wunderschönen guten Abend wünsche ich allerseits. Willkommen zur Buchpräsentation und Podiumsdiskussion heute, organisiert vom VIDC in Kooperation mit dem Festival Salam Orient. Mein Name ist Martina Laab und gemeinsam mit meiner Kollegin Katrin Bröll, die heute ein Konzert betreut, veranstalten wir heuer erstmals das Festival Salam Orient, was uns sehr viel Freude macht. Norbert Ehrlich, den Sie vielleicht kennen, hat das Festival vor mehr als 15 Jahren gegründet und seitdem sehr erfolgreich geleitet. Und er hat sich entschieden, vor einem Jahr ungefähr, sich langsam aus dem Festival zurückzuziehen und an uns, an mich, Martina Laab und Katrin Bröll zu übergeben. Und wir freuen uns sehr, dass wir diese Kooperation mit dem VIDC erfolgreich weiterführen können und wollen uns ganz herzlich für diese schöne Zusammenarbeit bedanken. Und ich übergebe nun das Wort an Magda Seewald. Sie wird Ihnen die Gäste vorstellen und weitere Informationen zum Abend geben. Vielen Dank.
Ja, schönen guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Wie Martina schon gesagt hat, mein Name ist Magda Seewald. Ich bin Referentin am VIDC und dort für den Nahen Osten, für den arabischen Raum zuständig. Und ich freue mich, Sie ganz herzlich zu unserer heutigen Veranstaltung Krise, Revolte und Krieg in der arabischen Welt begrüßen zu dürfen. Mein Dank gilt vor allem auch an dem Festival Salam Orient. Wir kooperieren schon sehr lange mit diesem Festival und es freut mich, dass wir auch unter der neuen Führung von Martina Laab und Katrin Bröll diese Kooperation weiterführen können. Ebenfalls bedanken möchte ich mich natürlich bei der Hauptbücherei, in diesen Räumlichkeiten wir die Veranstaltung heute stattfinden lassen können. Die heutige Veranstaltung findet auf Englisch und Deutsch mit Simultan-Dolmetschung statt. Ich spreche heute ausnahmsweise mal Deutsch, weil es hier auch eine Buchpräsentation ist und das Buch auf Deutsch erschienen ist und so schien es mir nur logisch zu sein, dass ich Deutsch spreche heute. Für diejenigen, die Dolmetschung brauchen, auf Kanal 2 ist Deutsch und auf Kanal 3 ist Englisch. An der Stelle möchte ich mich auch bei unseren beiden Dolmetscherinnen bedanken, Gabriele Gallo und Heinz Schmolz. Ich freue mich sehr über Ihren zahlreichen Besuch und ganz besonders freue ich mich natürlich, unsere beiden Referentinnen hier heute Abend begrüßen zu dürfen, Rabab El-Mahdi und Haifa Zangana. Herzlich willkommen in Wien. Welcome to Vienna. Ebenfalls begrüßen möchte ich natürlich meinen Kollegen Helmut Krieger. Er wird in der Folge die Veranstaltung moderieren und auch unsere beiden Referentinnen noch genauer vorstellen. Ja, meine Damen und Herren, die heutige Veranstaltung hat einen doppelten Anlass. Zum einen, wie bereits kurz erwähnt, freut es mich heute, dass wir unser gleichnamiges Buch präsentieren können, ein Buch über die letzten Entwicklungen in der arabischen Welt. Zum anderen werden wir mit den zwei Referentinnen, die auch Autorinnen im Buch sind, über mögliche Zukunftsperspektiven, also weitergehend als das Buch, diskutieren heute Abend. Das VIDC hat in den letzten Jahren eine Veranstaltungsreihe zu den Umbrüchen in der arabischen Welt seit ungefähr 2011 durchgeführt. Viele von Ihnen haben sie als unsere Stammgäste mitverfolgt. Primär ging es uns dabei, Hintergrundinformationen zu vermitteln und aktuelle Entwicklungen mit Ihnen zu erörtern. Wir haben besonders viel Wert darauf gelegt, Sichtweisen jenseits des eurozentristischen Mainstreams aufzuzeigen und dazu Aktivistinnen, Wissenschaftlerinnen, Intellektuelle aus der Region eingeladen und mit ihnen diskutiert. Für den Sammelband, den der Helmut schon gezeigt hat, haben wir nun einige dieser Wiener Vorträge neu bearbeitet, aktualisiert und übersetzt. Und am Ende sind nun 13 sehr unterschiedliche Beiträge entstanden, von einem Gedicht über Interview, über wissenschaftliche Beiträge hin zu Essays, die wir thematisch in 3 Kapitel untergliedert haben. Es ist uns wichtig gewesen, diese unterschiedlichen Typen von Texten auch zu verwenden, weil wir möglichst viele Menschen für dieses Buch gewinnen möchten und für den Inhalt vor allem des Buches. Das Buch beginnt mit einer Einführung zum Thema von Helmut Krieger, in dem er zukünftige Möglichkeitsräume antagonistischer und emanzipatorischer Politik in der arabischen Welt auslotet. Es folgt dann der Prolog zum Sammelband. Wie bitte? Ach so. Der Prolog zum Sammelband bildet ein Gedicht von Haifa Zangana. Er ist in englischer Sprache und dieses Gedicht soll uns vor Augen führen, dass es in den folgenden Analysen in erster Linie um Menschen geht, deren Leid oft gar nicht mehr gesehen wird. Im ersten Teil des Bandes mit dem Titel Globale Herrschaftsverhältnisse, Geschlechterpolitiken und der arabische Raum wird das westliche Agieren in der Region sowie der westliche Blick auf die Region einer kritischen Analyse unterzogen. Sabah al-Nasseri untersucht etwa am Beispiel von Libyen und Syrien Logiken und Absichten der Interventionen westlicher, aber auch regionaler Akteure, sowie deren Auswirkungen natürlich auf die Länder. Maya Mikdashi untersucht in ihrem Artikel, welche Wirkung Geschlecht als soziale und biologische Kategorie in den Analysen der arabischen Umbrüche erzielt. In einem Interview, das Helmut Krieger mit Silja Haders geführt hat, werden die Massenbewegungen der Revolten von 2011 und deren Auswirkungen auf die Menschen in den jeweiligen Ländern erörtert. Der zweite Teil des Sammelbandes mit dem Titel Identitätspolitiken, Konfessionalisierungen und Konfliktlogiken hinterfragt die zunehmende Konfessionalisierung der Konflikte in der Region. Hamid Dabashi etwa kritisiert in seinem Artikel Analysen der arabischen Revolutionen entlang religiöser und ethnischer Linien, was aus seiner Sicht einer tiefergehenden Betrachtung der islamischen Geschichte eine völlige Verzerrung bedeutet. Charlotte Wiedemann hinterfragt in ihrem Beitrag den War on Terror und attestiert einen tiefsitzenden, unbewussten Rassismus im westlichen Blick auf die arabische Region und den Dschihadismus. Der dritte und letzte Teil mit dem Titel Auf der Suche nach Zukunft in den Trümmern der Gegenwart enthält Beiträge zu den einzelnen Ländern in der Region und zeigt die Unterschiede in den jeweiligen Entwicklungen auf. Rabab El-Mahdi, die heute hier ist, setzt die Aufstände in Ägypten in einen globalen Kontext und fordert die Geschehnisse in Ägypten in einer Langzeitperspektive zu betrachten. Haifa Zangana, ebenfalls heute hier, schildert die desaströsen Auswirkungen der US-amerikanisch geführten Invasion auf den Irak und seine Bewohnerinnen und geht dabei hart mit der irakischen Elite ins Gericht. Sie warnt in ihrem Artikel auch vor den Folgen des Kampfes um Mossul, der ja in der Zwischenzeit stattgefunden hat, und leider sind ihre Warnungen eingetreten. Kritik am Regime in Syrien übt etwa in ihrem Artikel Salwa Ismail. Für sie ist die Frage nach der Natur der Gewalt im syrischen Kontext eine Schlüsselfrage, ebenso wie jene nach dem Stellenwert des Konfessionalismus innerhalb des Krieges. Als eine Gemeinsamkeit der arabischen Aufstände von 2011 sieht Adam Haniya das Aufbegehren der Bevölkerung gegen die Auswirkungen einer jahrzehntelangen neoliberalen Gestaltung der Geschichte in den betroffenen Ländern. Hier zieht er auch Parallelen zu Palästina etwa, wo eine solche Neoliberalisierung der Wirtschaft Teil der Entwicklungsstrategie der palästinensischen Behörden ist. Madawi al-Rashid geht in ihrem Beitrag der Frage nach, warum die saudische Monarchie während der Aufstände in der arabischen Region so viel Resilienz bewiesen hat und erläutert dabei den saudisch-religiösen Nationalismus und die Bedeutung der saudischen Interventionen in die unterschiedlichen Aufstände für die Stabilität im eigenen Land. El-Hamania führt in ihrem Artikel die Komplexität des Konfliktes im Jemen aus. Dieser letzte Teil schließt mit einem Beitrag zu jenem Land, in dem die Aufstände ihren Ausgangspunkt hatten, Tunesien. Hamza Medeb geht in seinem Artikel der Frage nach, ob post-2011 Tunesien ein demokratisches Wunder oder vielleicht doch nur ein Trugbild ist. Bevor ich jetzt nun an das Podium übergebe, möchte ich mich noch bei allen Vortragenden, Autorinnen, Übersetzerinnen, Impulsgeberinnen, die zum Gelingen der Vortragsreihe und des Sammelbandes beigetragen haben, möchte ich mich herzlich bedanken. Insbesondere gilt mein Dank meinem Herausgeber, Kollegen Helmut Krieger, und Sie dürfen gerne applaudieren, auch jetzt. Er hat nicht nur die Vortragsreihe hervorragend kuratiert und wird sie hoffentlich auch weiter kuratieren, sondern auch wesentlich zur Konzeption und Gestaltung des Sammelbandes beigetragen. Mein ganz herzlichen Dank an dich für deine viele Arbeit, die du da hineingesteckt hast. Ebenfalls geht mein Dank an die österreichische Entwicklungszusammenarbeit, die Austrian Development Agency für die finanzielle Unterstützung des gesamten Projektes. Sowie natürlich an meine Kolleginnen beim VIDC, insbesondere Irene Hochauer-Kopoda, die uns tatkräftig bei der Organisation der Veranstaltung unterstützt haben. Last but not least gilt mein Dank natürlich dem Verlag Westfälisches Dampfboot, in dem das Buch verlegt worden ist. Sie können das Buch auch gerne heute hinten am Büchertisch käuflich erwerben. Lassen Sie mich noch kurz Helmut Krieger vorstellen, bevor ich dann ans Podium übergebe. Helmut Krieger ist Sozialwissenschaftler und wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter am Institut für internationale Entwicklung der Universität Wien sowie Konsulent des VIDC. Seine Forschungsschwerpunkte sind der israelisch-palästinensische Konflikt, die Bewegungen des politischen Islam in der arabischen Welt, kritische Staatstheorien sowie postkoloniale Theoriebildung. Zu seinen aktuellen Veröffentlichungen zählen unter anderem Umkämpfte Staatlichkeit, Palästina zwischen Besatzung, Entwicklung und politischem Islam sowie die Aufsätze Das Ende der Hoffnung, Revolten in der arabischen Welt als diskontinuierlicher Prozess und Syrien, Aufstand, Krieg und Flucht. Des Weiteren ist Helmut Krieger der österreichische Projektleiter des APPEAR-Projektes Routing Development in the Palestinian Context, eine Hochschulkooperation zwischen der Universität Wien, der Birzeit University in der Westbank und der Al-Azhar University im Gazastreifen. Zu guter Letzt noch darf ich Sie darauf hinweisen, Sie haben auf Ihren Plätzen Feedbackbögen gefunden. Ich bitte Sie, diese zu nutzen mit Ihrer Kritik und Ihren Anregungen und sie im Anschluss an die Veranstaltung hinten in die blaue Box zu schmeißen. Und nun, the floor is yours, Helmut.
So, ich hoffe, Sie hören mich laut genug. Walter Bosch, Direktor des VIDC, sagt mir ja, sehr gut. Vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank, Magda, und selbstverständlich auch vielen herzlichen Dank an das Team des VIDC, eine wie üblich professionellst organisierte Veranstaltung. Auch vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank an Sie, meine Damen und Herren, Kollegen, Kolleginnen, dass Sie hier so zahlreich erschienen sind. Bevor ich unsere beiden Gäste, tollerweise aus London kommend, aus Kairo kommend, vorstelle, lassen Sie mich noch ganz kurz ein paar Worte zu unserem Buch sagen, zu Krise, Revolte und Krieg in der arabischen Welt. Warum haben wir das Buch überhaupt gemacht? Man könnte ja sagen, angesichts der Entwicklungen in der arabischen Welt, angesichts dessen, was soziale Verwerfungen sind, millionenfache Traumatisierungen, Kriegszyklen, Dschihadismus, das sind die Bilder, die wir permanent und gegenwärtig haben, wenn es um die arabische Welt geht, erscheint schon alles gesagt. Wir haben dieses Buch gemacht, ganz gezielt und bewusst als eine politische Intervention. Eine politische Intervention in verschiedene Debattenfelder, indem wir klar versuchen, den Prozess zu rekonstruieren, einen sehr, sehr diskontinuierlichen Prozess von der Frage von Krisen, Krisenzyklen in arabischen Ländern der 90er Jahre, der 2000er Jahre, Neoliberalisierungen innerhalb autoritärer politischer Regime, indem wir zugleich versuchen, das, was die Revolten 2011, 2012, 2013 ausgezeichnet haben, der Versuch, eine gesellschaftliche Utopie neu zu denken, auch historisch einbetten. Zu sagen, Revolten entstehen nicht von einem Moment auf den anderen. Sie fallen nicht vom Himmel. Sie haben Entwicklungen, sie haben unterschiedliche Kristallisationspunkte im Laufe von Jahren, im Laufe von Jahrzehnten. Und wir haben natürlich auch die Notwendigkeit, den weiteren Prozess zu zeichnen. Das heißt, wie aus dem Versuch der Entwicklung von progressiven, emanzipatorischen Transformationen arabischer Gesellschaften jene Zyklen von Konterrevolution und Krieg wurden, mit denen wir heute konfrontiert sind. Das ist natürlich ein ungeahnt komplexes Unterfangen und wir haben als Beginn ganz klar gesetzt, unser Buch sollte ein Kontrapunkt sein. Unser Buch muss ein Kontrapunkt sein gegenüber wirkmächtigen Erzählsträngen, die die arabische Welt nunmehr unter dem Diktum von Dschihadismus und entsprechend Krieg wahrnimmt, dem sogenannten War on Terror, der ein Krieg faktisch gegen die verschiedenen Zivilbevölkerungen in der arabischen Welt ist. Wir haben klar gesagt, wir müssen beginnen, dieses Bild, diese Erzählstränge über die arabische Welt zu dekonstruieren. Hegemonial wirkmächtige Bilder zu dezentrieren, um eine Erzählung zu ermöglichen, voller Widersprüche, um eine Erzählung zu ermöglichen, die aus der Perspektive von Marginalisierten, von Subalternen in eben diesem Raum sichtbar werden kann. Insofern ist das Buch eine Intervention gegen eine aus meiner Perspektive durchaus wirkmächtige Erzählweise über den arabischen Raum, in dem dieser Raum nunmehr wahrgenommen wird unter Dschihadismus und Krieg. Es ist damit auch eine Intervention in einen anderen Erzählstrang, der natürlich mit dem arabischen Raum zusammenhängt und hier in dieser Form, und wir haben das ja auch in den letzten Wochen und Monaten sehr genau mitbekommen, sehr stark präsent ist. Die Frage dessen, was als politischer Islam verhandelt wird, was oftmals homogenisiert, essentialisiert und dann als der andere, die andere im Inneren definiert, kriminalisiert etc. wird. Das heißt, dieses Buch versteht sich auch als eine Intervention gegen die systematischen Erzählstränge antimuslimischer Rassismen hier in diesem Land. Das Buch ist auch eine weitere Intervention zu etwas anderem. Zur Frage dessen, und das ist eine sehr sensible Annäherung, wie nah sind uns eigentlich jene Menschen, über die wir heute auch sprechen? Wie nah sind uns jene, die 2011 aufgestanden sind, auf der Suche nach Antworten, auf der Suche nach Würde, auf der Suche nach grundlegenden demokratischen, inklusiven, partizipativen Mechanismen, auf der Suche nach sozioökonomischer Gerechtigkeit. Das heißt, dieses Buch versteht sich nicht nur als eine Beschreibung über etwas, dieses Buch soll auch uns alle, Sie, mich, uns alle herausfordern, in dem, was unsere eigene politische und ich würde sagen moralische Verantwortung in diesem Prozess ist. Wenn wir, und das ist selbstverständlich ein ganz klarer normativer Standpunkt, wenn wir davon ausgehen, dass es notwendig ist, gesellschaftliche Utopien jenseits des Bestehenden zu überlegen, zu suchen, dann kann, und ich würde argumentieren, dann muss diese Suche eine gemeinsame sein. Eine gemeinsame mit jenen, die im Dort leben. Insofern verstehe ich dieses Buch als eine vielfältige Intervention auf der Suche nach gesellschaftlichen Alternativen. Soweit eine kurze Skizze der Hintergründe, der Überlegungen, warum wir gedacht haben, warum wir zu dem Schluss gekommen sind, dieses Buch letztendlich zu machen. Insofern waren an der Produktion dieses Buches sehr, sehr viele Kolleginnen, Kollegen, Freunde, Freundinnen beteiligt. Einerseits gilt natürlich mein herzlicher Dank an alle Übersetzer und Übersetzerinnen. Wir haben ja bewusst entschieden, dieses Buch auf Deutsch zu machen. Das heißt, eine Intervention in einen deutschsprachigen Raum, um damit hier noch einmal klar verschiedene Punkte, Standpunkte, Positionen als Denkräume zu öffnen. Einerseits die Übersetzerinnen, andererseits wäre das Buch selbstverständlich nicht ohne den VIDC möglich gewesen. Insofern mein ganz herzlicher Dank an den VIDC, der dieses Projekt überhaupt erst ermöglicht hat. Und selbstverständlich mein ganz herzlicher Dank an dich, Magda. Die letzten, sagen wir, 12 Monate an diesem Buch waren spannende Reisen, Entdeckungsreisen in dem Prozess des gemeinsamen Arbeitens, des Auslotens von Möglichkeiten, manchmal des Schließens von Einzelnen und manchmal des Öffnens von anderen. Insofern vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank für deine Arbeit, für letztendlich unsere Arbeit. Ich hoffe, Sie haben Freude an diesem Buch. Wie gesagt, Sie können das käuflich erwerben im Anschluss an die Veranstaltung hinten im Raum. Soweit in Bezug auf dieses Buch. Wir haben dementsprechend auch zwei Gäste eingeladen, die selbst entsprechende Beiträge in diesem Buch verfasst haben. Wunderbare Beiträge. Einerseits zum Irak. Und ich denke, wir wissen alle, wir haben im Laufe der letzten Jahre auch verschiedene Veranstaltungen zum Irak gemacht, was eine gesellschaftliche Situation jenseits eines War on Terror bedeutet, was eine zerstörte Stadt wie Mosul, die ursprünglich fast 2 Millionen Einwohner und Einwohnerinnen hatte, was zerstörte Städte wie Ramadi, Fallujah heute bedeuten, was die Auseinandersetzung um Kirkuk etc. bedeutet. Haifa wird genauer darauf eingehen. Wir sind im Kontext mit Ägypten konfrontiert mit einer Konterrevolution, die offensichtlich jegliche Grenzen sprengt. Und viele Kolleginnen sagen, was wir unter Mubarak erlebt haben, ist nicht zu vergleichen mit dem, was heute unter Sisi passiert. Eine kaum verhüllte Militärdiktatur mit den verschiedenen Repressionsapparaten. Amnesty International spricht in einem neuen Bericht von ungefähr, und das ist eine sehr vorsichtige Schätzung, 1500 Verschwundenen im Laufe der letzten Monate. Also einem Repressionsprozess, der uns erscheint wie ein Schatten aus der Vergangenheit. Wir kannten das von südamerikanischen Militärdiktaturen. Der Ende der 70er Jahre, der 80er Jahre, Argentinien und Chile. 1500 Verschwundene in Ägypten. Rabab wird uns hier genaueres dazu berichten. Ich möchte wunderbarerweise, dass ihr da seid, noch schnell die Gelegenheit nutzen, unsere beiden Gäste vorstellen. Haifa Zangana ist eine irakische Schriftstellerin und Aktivistin. Sie veröffentlichte Romane, Kurzgeschichten und ist auch Kolumnistin für verschiedene Medien, britische, US-amerikanische Romane. Women on a Journey Between Baghdad and London aus dem Jahr 2007 und das berühmte Buch Dreaming of Baghdad aus dem Jahr 1990. Gemeinsam mit Ramsey Clark und Thomas Ehrlich Reifer publizierte sie ein sehr tiefgründiges Buch über Folter, The Torturer in the Mirror von 2010 und hat erst unlängst, wie sie uns heute erzählt hat, vor wenigen Wochen ein Buch veröffentlicht, das sie gemeinsam geschrieben hat oder auch den Raum für ehemalige palästinensische gefangene Frauen veröffentlicht, ist via E-Book erhältlich. Daneben ist sie noch Gründungsmitglied der International Association of Contemporary Iraqi Studies und Mitbegründerin von Tadamun, Iraqi Women Solidarity. Ich springe zu dir, Rabab. Rabab ist Associate Professor am Department of Political Science der American University in Cairo. Davor war sie für verschiedene Entwicklungsorganisationen tätig, für diverse NGOs, für UN-Agenturen. Sie selbst promovierte in Montreal mit einer Arbeit zu den Auswirkungen des neoliberalen Umbaus, der Neoliberalisierung, neoliberaler gesellschaftlicher Umwälzungen in Ägypten und Bolivien. Rabab hat natürlich viele unterschiedliche Forschungsinteressen, darunter Beziehungen zwischen Staat und Zivilgesellschaft, die Frage von sozialen Bewegungen, die Frage von Widerstand sehr allgemein gefasst, sowie natürlich auch eine politökonomische Analyse dessen, was Staat bedeutet. Vielen herzlichen Dank, dass ihr beide gekommen seid. Vielleicht noch ein ganz kurzes Wort zu dem Format. Wir haben vereinbart, Haifa und Rabab werden einen kurzen Input machen, 5 bis 10 Minuten auf Englisch. Wir switchen dann, also ab diesem Zeitpunkt, auf Englisch. Wir machen dann anschließend eine kurze Diskussionsrunde, wie gesagt auf Englisch. Wenn Sie eine Übersetzung ins Deutsche haben möchten, bitte nützen Sie dafür die Headsets, Kanal 2. Und anschließend, und ich hoffe, wir haben dann noch eine Stunde Zeit, ist der Raum für Sie, für Ihre Fragen, für Ihre Einschätzungen, für Ihre Kommentare zu dem, was wir heute hier sagen und darüber hinaus. May I ask you to make this very short input? Oh, I'm very sorry. Yes, a very long introduction to our book.
No, finally we get rid of this.
Oh yeah, you are.
Right, okay. Who do I thank? I mean, Helmut, Magda, for asking me to contribute to this wonderful book, really. I mean, at a time when I was asked, I was hesitant for one reason, because, Iraqi events get into you, whether you like it or not, whether you are an activist or not, but gradually gets into you, and sometimes you think, what's the point of doing this? But thank you, Helmut, for being persistent and also for translating it not from English, but from Arabic as well, so which made the job is twice as difficult as any other text, probably. So, and thank you all, I mean, for coming and listening to us. Some people might think, well, like The Guardian, one of the Guardian editors told me, I used to write for The Guardian, and he said, well, there is Iraq fatigue. People are tired of Iraq, so we better start something else. And so thankfully nowadays we have Mosul, we have Kirkuk, we have ISIS. So Iraq is not fatigue anymore. Doesn't cause that to people. More exciting, actually. Excitement is part of the media, and the media is one of the contributors. I think Hamid Dabashi, he wrote about in the book, one of the valuable contributions. I think it's very important when what we read in the media is to question what we are reading and to check facts. In most cases, what we read is what is easier for editors, easier for journalists in some cases. Not all of them, but that's part of it. About Iraq in general, I can't see many people in the audience who are my age, but at the time in the 60s, during Vietnam War, or I don't know what they call it, Vietnam War, because it's the American war against Vietnam. The same thing like the war on Iraq is, so it should be called that in that way. At that time, whenever the Communist Party used to organize their annual conference, they are so engrossed into the details of what's happening and the relationship among people, trying to reestablish and organize everything and rebuilding. So they end up, when it comes to the international situation, one sentence all the time. They say, international situation hasn't changed much, or it's too complex. So it's always too complex. Comparing that to Iraq, I think it's not the international too complex, but both the details within Iraq itself and the international situation. So it's not impossible to understand, it's slightly difficult to understand. And that's how we find it when we start talking about Iraq and what are the forces playing or taking roles in changing events. And events are changing so fast that sometimes, I mean, we can't even catch up with them or try to understand. We don't have the time to understand in a deep way or as much as we like. So we are just shifting quickly from one thing to another to another. We would like, I would like to claim that what I wrote, my contribution was trying an attempt to understand what's going on in Iraq, but from the point of view, not the international community, not the internationally, but from the human perspective. Human beings who are suffering on a daily basis, human beings who we lost in their thousands since the occupation of 2003, and it seems like there isn't end to it. Also, I like to claim, though I know my Egyptian colleague is here, and I live in Tunisia part of the year, so the Tunisian claim that the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, the Egyptians say, no, we started that and we pushed it toward that, there is something. So I would like to also to claim that part of the Arab Spring actually is the consequences or part of the invasion of Iraq. And what we see of the change of the policy of trying to change the map, the Middle East map, is a consequence of this. And it's a systematic one. It's not a collateral damage at all. It's a consistent, systematic plan to change the whole area, but also for the people to revolt, for the people to take part and to trying to change things. It's also happened immediately after the occupation of Iraq, which you mentioned earlier. It's in Fallujah. At the end of 2003, beginning of 2004, Fallujah people revolted against the occupation, and that was the first step. It was very peaceful to start with about little things, and I like to remind about this because it seems things happening so fast we almost delete what's happening yesterday, or we are asked, well, don't talk about history. History is only a month ago, they call it nowadays, but tell me about now, give me a solution now. We are demanded all the time. So Fallujah people, they went to the school, primary school, and they asked the US forces, occupying forces, to leave it because we want our children to go back to school. As simple as that. It could happen anywhere in the world. They were faced with killing them. They shot at them and they killed them. This day after, they went on a demonstration, peaceful demonstration again, they were shot at, and that's what it started. Fallujah was destroyed. 85% of the city destroyed. Most of it still hasn't been built yet. We're talking about 2004. That was followed of other cities around Iraq, as if there is a repetition of it, the thing. And we thought, well, Mosul is the biggest example, the latest. And unfortunately, sadly, and to add to the plight of Iraq, is now we see witnessing something similar simmering in Kirkuk city, where within 3 days, 110,000 people had to leave, or too frightened, too scared. In a climate of fear, they had to leave their city and moving to other cities. The total of the people who are displaced at the moment are 5 million, and this is the latest figure by the United Nations. It's been declared a week ago. 5 million is not just a figure. It's a change of a whole country. It's the society, fragmentation of a society. These places, people were staying in camps, people who are staying within their friends or other families. It's a huge burden. With the lack of education, with the lack of health service, with being not growing, children not growing in the healthy, right environment for them, you can see it clearly. And this is something we keep warning about. You can see it clearly. This is an incubator for a future, what they call terrorist. So whatever happening for the time being, where they declaring victory on ending the ISIS, in Fallujah, in Syria, or in Mosul, or anywhere else around in the Middle East, this is not going to end. There is something else going to sprout unless really looking into the root of the problem and finding genuine solution for the people who are suffering. We are going to be in a complete catastrophe, and we've seen it move. We've seen it move. It's not anymore in the Middle East. Globalization left nowhere safe, no matter how many walls you build. To protect yourselves, it's moving from one country to another to another. So injustice is being globalized. Globalization is ending any feeling of surrounding or cornering injustice in one place of the world where you feed proxy regimes, supplying them with weapons, supplying them what they need to oppress their own people. It's not anymore. It's spreading all over the world. So this is something we need to look critically at. And I think it's one of the good things about the book is really contributed to our better understanding of what's happened, and also trying. We're not really having the magic wand of finding solution to all these things, but by trying to understand what's happening in the past, which could be last month, a month before, or all these events happening, and trying to work together, we might be able to do or make some change. I mean, through understanding, through other ways. So that's what I.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Haifa, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Rabab, would you like to continue?
I know by now, probably you're bored with all the thanking, as if you're here for us to thank each other. But I really have to thank the Institute, of course, for allowing us this opportunity, but particularly Magda and Helmut. And this is not just the usual properness for being invited, but I think there is something that's foundationally political and humanistic about doing this project at this point. 2011 and until 2013, at least, everyone was interested in the Arab world. There was the euphoria. We were just like, oh, look at them. What did they do? How did you do it? This kind of thing, which is very infantilizing and condescending in its own way, right? It was like, yeah, the monkey can now speak, kind of thing. But then that euphoria turned into falling on preconceived notions about, you know what, this region is good for nothing. They just, they're going to fall back into the same dynamics of killing each other, harassing their women, sending us more refugees or terrorists. So no one is particularly interested in, if they're interested in very Orientalist way, or at least the very simplistic way that Haifa talked about. So for Magda and Helmut to take the time to push us all to write and to reflect and to translate this. And as an academic, I know what it takes for edited volumes, You're doing everyone thinks they're doing you a favor and they don't send things on time, and it's just like. So I am very, very grateful, and especially grateful for the selection of people who contributed to the volume, many of which I respect very much, both intellectually and politically. Now, yes, the world is complex. I totally agree with Haifa. And I think today I was faced repeatedly with this question about, what's left from the Arab uprising. And this kind of Iraq fatigue that you mentioned, I think there might be an Arab fatigue, so to speak. Things seem to be repeating themselves, and only in uglier ways. But I can't, as a human being, I can't seem to think of what's going on in my country and in the region away from what's going on in the world. And to take a historical perspective to that. I mean, when I look at the president of my country, I can't help but to look at the rise of Trump in the US and the rise of right-wing governments in Europe. So, and what this tells me is that we in the Arab world are not an anomaly. We are not an exception, even if it might look that way. Again, different global phenomenon take different manifestations in different regions just by virtue of geography, history, and culture that's different. But at the end of the day, I think what we are facing is a very historical transition. It's a historical transition in the sense that when the Arab uprisings happened, they did not happen in a vacuum. Yes, they happened in the Arab world, but they also happened in Occupy Wall Street. They came at the backdrop of the American invasion of Iraq and all the global movement that this initiated. So we saw a cry at that time for a different world. We saw this, across the globe, and including the Arab world and the Middle East. Accordingly, the rise of the counter-revolution might take the form of war, as we see in Syria and Yemen, or the rise of military dictatorship, as we see in Egypt, but also the rise of the localized version of authoritarian movements and discourses in Europe and in the US. And thinking of where to go from here when it comes to a place like Egypt or the Arab world cannot be thought about in a vacuum. It has to be thought about in terms of the regional dynamics, but also the global dynamics. Those governments, such as the Egyptian regime, do not exist in a vacuum. They exist and live and thrive when there is a moment where they have international allies across the globe who think that the priority is to combat so-called terrorism at the cost of human life, whether this is in Iraq, what happens, or whether it's how we kick out and build walls against refugees and demonize them. And actually, authoritarian regimes feed off that. So people think that supporting a regime like the current Egyptian regime would be protection from more refugees and more terrorism, and tend to forget that this refugee crisis is actually caused by the Syrian dictatorship and the Assad refusing to give in, and the country dwindling into this kind of civil war. Those people they're not crazy, they didn't wake up to kill each other, but actually what happened is very similar to what Haifa was talking about in Al-Fallujah, something very small, very similar for school children. You cannot arrest children, just dwindled because of the atrocities of authoritarianship and dictatorship into this kind of civil strife that we see. Accordingly, I think when going back to that question that I was asked this morning about what's left of the Arab uprising and where we go from here in the case of Egypt, can only be answered by answering, what's left of that global moment of aspirations that, we live in a free world of solidarity, of support. And I think what we're confronting is very well a crisis, as the title of this book calls it. But it's not a crisis pertaining to the Middle East only or the Arab world. It's a crisis pertaining to parliamentarian democracy as we know it, how useful it is to the people as a vehicle for politics, for realizing their dream. What is capitalism becoming in this day and age? And how do we think of issues of national security, across borders, internally within different societies? And I think unless we, as a collective, as a human race, can reach progressive answers on those fronts, more Sisis and more Assad and more Trumps are going to be taking over. And of course the price varies, like the kind of, because I also don't want to underestimate what it means to live under a dictatorship of the Assad kind versus an authoritarianship of Sisi type versus something like Trump or a right-wing movement, government in Europe. The human price is very different, but the causation and the roots are very much the same, and they feed into each other on daily basis, but also in terms of alliances. It's not a coincidence that when Trump decided to visit the region, he went to Saudi Arabia. And it's not a coincidence that the Egyptian ruling class celebrated the victory of Trump as if he is one of their own. If he was their cousin, they wouldn't have been that happy. So I think we need to, in order to answer those big, that seem like academic or macro-political questions, we need to also question our own personal lives, whether in Vienna or in Cairo. How are those authoritarian dynamics going across borders and reflecting themselves, and how are we contributing or resisting on an individual level? I think we're at the crossroads, and I keep mentioning this every time I talk to Helmut, Magda, every time I write. The idea of the fin de siècle in the European sense, the interwar period, is just, I've been obsessing about this since 2013. Anything I come across about, fascism or Nazism, and the similarities are frightening in terms of how the simple things arise, and we think, oh no, it's just, one small incident here, one small incident there, but this cannot turn into this human catastrophe. You know what? I guess it is. And I guess we're at crossroads. We do have alternatives in formulation, just like we had in the beginning of the 20th century. Again, as opposed to Trump, there was a Bernie Sanders. You have Jeremy Corbyn. And I think those are flashes of hope and a clear cry that alternatives from outside the establishment are needed, whether in Cairo or in Vienna. But what kind of alternatives are being presented, I think, will decide the future of us and generations to come. The images of Mosul might very well, and Hama before, might very well be images that we see across the globe very soon. And on this very cheerful note, I will stop.
Yes, thank you very much, Rabab. Thank you so much for this picture of responsibilities, I would call it, and thanks again for your words on the situation in Iraq. Just let me put one question on the revolts. I mean, it might be clear an imperial project of state building in Iraq since 2003, the whole destruction, the question of jihadism, the takfir is there, mass mobilizations on different communal levels, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, a very strict and brutal counter-revolution. But what do you think are the experiences, the rich histories activists from 2011 made, and what are the experiences that should be a necessary component of all future possible options?
Yes.
Yes, Haifa, what do you think?
Okay. 2011, we're talking about, yes. Immediately, I mean, when young people heard about what's happening in Tunisia and what's happening in Egypt, we had, and as you know, probably you all know that in each Arab city there is a Tahrir Square. We have it. It's something related to the period of post-colonial period where we had our Tahrir. Liberation, freedom represented in a square in the middle of the city. And in Baghdad city, we have Tahrir Square, exactly like in Egypt. And overlooking it, one of the most beautiful art work by a prominent Iraqi artist who did this relief overlooking the square. So young people gathered there. It wasn't organized to start with. It's only been influenced by the banner and solidarity with Tunisia, solidarity with Egypt. And it was absolutely crowded, the whole place, full, men, women. And despite at that time, Baghdad was divided by walls, concrete walls, and also by checkpoints. It's like a scar on the face of beautiful Baghdad. It was almost, it takes you hours to move from one place to other, but people walked, defying checkpoints, defying those walls, and defying also Tahrir Square is near the green zone, where the biggest embassy, U.S. embassy in the world is there. Fortified one, too, yeah, and the security around it, they were there in their thousands. And they continued to be there every Friday. They continued for 6 months, doing it like religiously every Friday, meeting, shouting, singing, doing everything possible in a peaceful way. Then the helicopters came, they showered them with bullets. 29 people were killed. More were imprisoned, and they've been kidnapped. Women were kidnapped, and gradually, time after time. And more important than all of that, there was a religious fatwa by the high religious cleric in Najaf. This is really very respectable figure in Iraq, supposedly. And he issued a fatwa that it is in order to protect the lives of those young men, they should stop. Or it has to be regulated by the government. I mean, the government was more than pleased, the regime was than pleased to do that with the police and everything. And that was almost the end of it. But they then, every single year, suddenly they go back, the young people, and do the same thing. This, though it was, didn't last long, like 6 months or more, but forced the government at that time One of the main issues they were demanding is the departure of the US forces. And that's happened before and it came after, so also the government used it as one of their demands that you have to leave the country and the whole thing. So in that sense, it achieved something, that there are no more US forces in Iraq directly in bases, but indirectly within the embassy as mercenaries and other forces. And this going on is still happening, still people, they gather there and do. Civil society itself is, some of it, I mean, especially NGOs, is really nothing you can, I call some of those NGOs, or most prominent of them, are not non-governmental organizations, but I call them governmental, non-governmental organization, because they really related to this minister or that ministry or that militia or something sponsored. But this, it's all happening in a way because the brutality of the regime is such, like, unbelievably against any initiative, whoever take an initiative, peacefully or non-peacefully, whatever, either they'll be kidnapped or killed. And since 2003, actually, it's not 2011, but been like almost, they've been given a green card that to continue what they are doing is with impunity, is almost none being arrested for killing an activist or killing a doctor or a scientist. None whatsoever, no investigation whatsoever. That did not happen, though the figure of hundreds of those people being killed and things. So the brutality of the regime and this climate of fear is almost not putting totally end to the movement, but it's restricting it, definitely. It's affecting it in general, and it's also being cut off the outside world. You see, you hardly, I mean, if we talk about anything happening now, many of the projects outside Iraq, you hardly mention Iraq. You don't. There is no link with civil society, with the community. And when we are asked as activists in solidarity outside Iraq also, the people ask me, for example, can you recommend an NGO which we can work with or a charity which we work with? No, we can't really. Because those people, if we give their names, they be immediately targeted. So it's vast, it's huge. It's not really, I don't want to make people depressed or not willing to do anything, but this is the reality, and we have to find ways of dealing with it after understanding it in order that. It's, the link with the outside world is very weak. It's almost non-existent at the moment.
Rabab, the experiences of the revolts of 2011, the experience that should be brought to new developments in the future, I don't know.
I mean, I think there's at least now almost 2 decades of experiences. Because I want to just second what Haifa was saying earlier. We cannot understand the Arab uprising happening in 2011 without understanding first the support movements for the second Palestinian Intifada in 2001. This was the first time for us to see people taking back to the streets and going to Tahrir Square in decades. Actually, interestingly, the only time before was in 1991 with the American invasion of Iraq, the first time. And then again, the only time Tahrir Square was actually taken by a sit-in was in 2003 with the American invasion of Iraq. I remember on the 25th of January 2011, when I walked into the square, my first thing I was telling a friend of mine, a human rights activist, was like, this looks like 2003, because that was the only memory. So I think on a certain level, that interconnectedness between the anti-imperialist project in post-colonial societies and the current cry for emancipation and freedom from authoritarian regimes was very much a lesson that we need to keep in mind, this interconnectedness. And I think over those, what now is like 17 years, there has been a continuity and lessons learned. But I do think that 2011 is a point of rupture or an end of a particular phase. So as if there was an accumulation of experiences from 2000 until 2011, where it culminates in that moment. But then, from that moment on, and because of the forcefulness of the counter-revolution, it seems that the lessons that we have learned in the past decade do not, I mean, they're important, but they can only be lessons. They cannot be a replica. Like, we can't do what we have been doing again. So the idea of organizing the kind of international conferences that we organized in Cairo, you know, against Zionism and imperialism, that's not possible now, right? The million people's marches that were in Baghdad, in Cairo, and in Tunisia every Friday, again, ain't happening. So what do we do now? And I think there are two ways of drawing lessons. There are drawing lessons of the idea, you know, the mechanical understanding of, you know what, we go to the streets, millions of us are going to join, then we topple the regime. No, like, ain't happening for some time. So what do we do now in terms of organization that can actually tries to create a dent in the imperialist project, in the authoritarian project, because they're very, in our region, they're very much interlinked. And I think at this point, there seemed to be a creative energy, right? But a creative energy that's not organized or channeled yet. Because the people who were very creative in organizing those kinds of events from 2000 until 2017, I mean, I wanted to say didn't disappear, but actually, literally, some of them did. But the legacies are there, and the technologies are there. But they need to be organized differently. The idea that we can organize a trade union, for example, the same way that we did in the 60s and the 70s, or even up until organization of our own independent trade unions in 2007, 2008, is not feasible anymore. And I think this kind of mental labor that's infused with practical experience is very much needed. And using things that, you know, as a radical activist myself, 10 years, I was like, oh, yeah, God, you know, when people said things about, you know, resisting using the art, I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, we liberate countries by drawing things. But actually, you know what? Turns out that authoritarian regimes are so afraid of the art. All the graffiti in Cairo that we did throughout, I mean, it's crazy. It's just, they spend so much time and effort and energy tracing and running around, you know, small kids spraying things. And now it's, you know, I'll say just this one example and stop, because I don't want to take more time. But people have become so creative that they don't do the regular things. So they don't write the slogans, you know, down with the military or things like that. They just take small words or incomplete sentences from the president's speeches. The president, very unfortunate, just like Trump, cannot, you know, formulate ideas and verbalize them in, oh, this is going to, you know, ban me from travel, but I just had to, it's amazing. I mean, it's like they are, I think, very challenged in a way. So he ends up saying those things that don't make sense, right? So people take it and they just graffiti it on walls, and you wake up the next day, say like there's no obscenities, just 2 words, but everyone will see the 2 words and laugh. So I think those are the kinds of experiences. Not that this is the only thing. Because again, I think international solidarity is exceptionally important. Today I was thinking, you know, is it worth it coming here, speaking to journalists, having this public event? I see it's like, you know, the price. And then, you know what? No, for political purposes, it is worth it. Because again, if those challenges are global, we need to think about them creatively across boundaries.
Yeah,
Yes.
quite clear. The issue of international
Totally
solidarity.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I thought that you agree.
And how to create this kind of new spaces by using also a quite old-fashioned term, international solidarity,
Yeah.
dating back to the, I don't know, to the 19th century.
You're quite old. Yeah.
Indeed, I am. Just let me ask you a last question, and we, I think, have to raise this issue too, especially when it comes to a quite deeply rooted way of dealing with the Arab world, Western media, political discourses here in Europe, and so on and so forth. The issue of identity politics. Also, the issue of identity politics as a way of stabilizing power within different Arab countries. Identity politics, sectarian politics.
Absolutely.
How to analyze them, how to decenter them. I mean, we can face it in Iraq, in Syria,
It's
wherever
all
you.
over now.
Yeah.
Let me just go back about the international solidarity.
Yeah.
I think there are many levels. It's multifaceted. It's not just one level. And art plays brilliant role because it's attractive to people and it touches very deep. Literature does that as well. But on the other hand, when you face a major, like occupation, for example, a country occupied, what kind of solidarity you ask people? You ask ordinary people, you ask officials, you ask academics, you ask the media and the whole. In addition to criticize foreign policy is very important because it's related to the others. And as I mentioned before, with the globalization, I think there is no foreign policy anymore. It's all internal policy. So we need to rethink what is foreign policy. And second, it's about hypocrisy. The hypocrisy which we face and double standard. Those are government which we elected. And I say we elected because I've been living in Britain for over 40 years, more than what I lived in Iraq in terms of time. So the double standard, when you see the aspiration of people is democracy, genuine democracy, and human rights they want. These are what we deprived of in political atmosphere. And yet the countries, major countries, with democracy, with elections and all, they come and supply weapons to our dictators, of which on daily basis are oppressing the people. We need to look into that. Who is selling what? Is there any control of that? Anybody asking how they ending this? And I go back to ISIS. The weapons they are using, where did they get them from? We need to question that. Is it available in the market, in a supermarket they go shopping? Who supply them? And what can we do? Especially, I mean, with the new developments now of weapons provided to the whole world, the US doesn't need any more military bases in many countries. All what they do is they have it with drones, they have with mercenaries, so they don't sacrifice the lives of their own soldiers. They're protecting their own security. On the other hand, they're sacrificing other people's lives. So human rights are in real danger. It's abused internationally. It's abused sometimes more than what the terrorists, what they call terrorists, are doing. Legally, this is legalized, and we have to look into that as well. This selective meaning of democracy, human rights, and those big. Is it right to go and demolish a whole city, pretending that we are liberating it? We've seen it. It's been daily happening now. The average number, which it's important to look into it, is of airstrike by the US-led Allied on Syria and Iraq within the last 2 years is airstrike per 8 minutes. Every 8 minutes there is airstrike. How does it feel? How going the future generation grow up in this? How are they going to resist? How are they going to change the world or build up bridges with the outside world, if there is any left? These are things we need to think about, and I totally about being creative in facing this. How we resist, how we invent, how we be creative. But are we the people who are traumatized, who've been almost psychologically not depressed, but being led from one war to another, and grow in such atmosphere? Can we be creative, really? Can we be able to fight using these human, beautifully ways, peaceful ways of facing this cruel world? If we can, this is brilliant way of, but we definitely in countries where they're enjoying stability and democracy. And I feel very angry. Actually, I felt so angry during when at the peak of bombardment of Iraq that the British people, they went and they re-elected Tony Blair. And the American people, they went and re-elected George Bush. And they knew it, people knew it, that it was a war of aggression and it was targeting the people, not anyone else. So how we reach this equilibrium of emotion, of dreams, of aspirations, of ways of resistance, of living together as human beings, as you mentioned, I mean, part of it is what we talk about here and what we discuss, and hopefully we reach each one of us reach some way or another. And you are young anyway, so you don't feel as tired as myself, which is good, brilliant. And the other question was?
The question about,
I'm sorry.
The question about identity politics, the way how sects, so-called sects, sectarianism is used as a political tool to gain power, to stabilize.
I mean, without giving any theory about it, let me just tell you what's happened. I've been brought up in a country that I did not know what religions my friends are, whether they were Christians, Muslims, never mind Shiite or Sunni. This is something I didn't know. We didn't know. It was a secular country. It's not I am trying to minimize the role of religion, but it was a secular country, and we lived. But immediately after 2003, we've started to see this Sunni, Shiite, Kurd, Arabs in a big way. The Kurd and Arab was different. I mean, that was a different story. Ethnically different. We had various regimes attacking, and the Kurds attacking is different. But Sunni Shia, we didn't have it. And the important thing is to bear in mind within Iraqi family, and until now, we have the intermarriages. So with the intermarriages within my family, my father is a Kurd from Kirkuk. My mother is an Arab. She claims to be pure. I don't know how, but she claims that. She's from Baghdad. And my grandparents are from Karbala, which is what they call Shia now, center of Islam. So how can you find that? And I am not unique. This is a typical Iraqi family. It consists of this plus the Christians, Sabaean, we have them all in the country, and we live together over thousands of years. Nothing happened to us. So this is one thing. So when suddenly, after the invasion, you see this, you must start to think there must be something happening. What is happening? So you need to check, it's about the manufacturing. There is identity, new identity coming, brought up with, you watch the daily details and you see that the government is built on the quota system, sectarian quota system. It's important to divide and rule. It might sound a rhetoric saying that, but this is actually a typical lesson happened in Iraq, where division we've seen, the rewriting of history happened while we're still alive. We were the people, and some people started to believe it, and the repetition of it, to the extent nowadays when they meet you, especially in the media for interviewers, saying, the first thing they ask you, are you a Shiite or a Sunni? No, I'm not. I'm not this or that, or anything. I am an Iraqi. I'm sorry, I'm not any of this nonsense thing. But it's happening. And there is some success. And I'll be in denial if I don't say that. But we can also, we have the time, I can go through the steps, gradual steps of building up these new identities. It's in Iraq, which didn't exist before, and it is important now in order to control the country. The fragmentation started, the society is suffering from it, but still it's not as deep, as systematic as they want it to be. Because the unity of the family is still there. And in fact, there is a statistic which is absolutely defy all these claims that about sectarianism and other. There is a recent statistic that the marriages between Sunni and Shia, obviously they think, are still the same average as it used to be. So where is the killing and the fighting? If we look about ordinary people, I'm not talking about politicians and how they lead the country, but among the people, it's not as deep as they want it. It might work in the next 20 years. We never know. I mean, we can't claim to be people are fully, again, it might work. But until now, still, Iraq is unified in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I remember the question. I'm good. Not sure if this would be a disagreement with you, Haifa, or not. But I think there is an issue of sectarianism that has always been masked by authoritarianism. And this is why there is a tradition between, Bourguiba, the Ba'athis, the Nasserite, they all claimed to be secular and hence building the nation. But by doing that, and they quite claim to be pro-women and women liberation. But within that, many good concepts like secularism, like feminism, became very much associated, and rightly so, with authoritarianism. And by doing this, by trying to overcome sectarianism, they were actually perpetuating it, because the idea was, you know, you guys are only Iraqis because I am there and because I create this Ba'athi identity in Syria or Nile Sarite identity in Egypt, whatever. But again, it's me as a regime, as the father figure, because there's patriarchy is very much there as well. I'm the only protection against Muslims killing Copts in Egypt, or Sunnis versus Shia, and in the making of this kind of secularism, manufacturing the seeds for sectarianism. And so now where we go? Where do we go from here? As it is, whether manufactured, because everything, I mean, socially is manufactured in a sense, so I completely agree, and it's played with. But as it stands, yes, people are killing each other based on identity, and we need to face this. You know, this is happening in villages in Upper Egypt. This is happening in Syria. It's happening in Iraq. And actually, I think the only way out is for people to feel a belonging to something bigger than their sects. Like, people withdraw to sects when things are so harsh, when they're so harsh that they can't get a job except using those kinds of networks economically, when they're so harsh that your only protection within an authoritarian setting would be your tribe or your family or your class. People just revert to those very debased belongings. But when they have, why didn't we see those kinds of sectarian identities being played out in the epitome of the Arab Spring? Right? In Egypt, when people were chanting in Tahrir Square, the main chant was, "Irfa, hold your head up high, you're Egyptian. Not your Muslim, not your Copt." I mean, later on, the Salafis wanted to do the whole Muslim version, hold your head up high, you're a Muslim, and they were booed out of the square. That happens at points when people feel that they belong to something bigger, and that their individuality as humans is respected without having to revert to being a particular sect or whatnot. So I guess the easy but very difficult in terms of a practical making, the answer is, the way out of this is for people to have an aspiration and to belong to things that connect them on a level outside of that.
Just regarding Iraq as a secular, I don't know much about the differences now with, I mean, the incidents happening in Egypt and during the uprising and all. But when I say Iraq was a secular, I go back to 1958, to the revolution. And in fact, Iraq was considered for almost 5 years, is a communist country. So we can't be more secular than that. And it wasn't an authoritarian regime like we immediately jump into Saddam's regime. So he forced this, and about feminism and the state feminism and all that role. I've been through all this before so many times. No, I'm talking about even earlier time.
Before,
yeah.
In the early
So
60s.
it is absolutely secular, and that's the society we've been brought up. What is a slight change started, we saw, is during the Iraq-Iran war, where the Iranians becoming like the martyrs and the war using the Shiitism to counter that, even by the Ba'ath regime, was so they started looking at, look, we are different, we are not this. Also playing the Sunni and that slide. But a secular country is a secular country. You don't need really an authoritarian regime in order to cover up on that in Iraq. It hasn't been covered. And funny enough, I mean, until now, the Communist Party is active in Iraq, and there are some of them involved in the civil society. Okay, they are not as they used to be. In fact, I call them civil society NGO, an NGO turning into it, but they are still there, and some of the young generation as well. In fact, I met one of Ayatollahs, if you know, it's the high clericals, and called Jawad al-Khalisi. He's one of good men. And he was telling me, he was saying that even the most secular government and regime would have worked against, I mean, in Iraq, they wouldn't have succeeded into turning Iraq into a secular country than what is suffering now until Islamist parties. So they're doing so much damage, those Islamist parties, that young people now turning against them and turning towards secularism. They don't want to know much about it anyway. So this is kind of we are back to where we were, in a way. I mean, paying higher price, yes, but it is this. I'm not a defender of secularism anywhere in the Middle East, but also we accept that the freedom of choice is important for all, and that's the important bit. And it could be used as a tool, I mean, by any regime, religions and otherwise.
As could be clearly seen after the invasion of the US in Iraq in 2003 and the establishment of a kind of sectarian quota system in parliament, or using different parties based on a specific sectarian discourse.
Or using women issues.
Or using
the feminism, which I call colonial feminists. Yeah. We have them very active in Iraq, embedded or colonial feminists. They've been there. Collaborated, and they worked to give it the gentle, nice feminist face to the occupation. And at a later stage, they use it as the military. They were working for the military, and those are feminists as well. We need to look into these. It's not to jump at ready-made things that it was deep in society under authoritarian regime, and suddenly when the authoritarian regime, like Saddam Hussein, disappeared, so everything came up. No, it's not like that. It's not like that in Iraq anyway.
Yeah, I think we could continue our discussion for hours when it comes to the question of international solidarity, when it comes to the question of our responsibilities here, when it comes to what we used also in our book, the issue of imperialism and imperial intervention, when it comes to the issue of identity politics, sectarianism, and so on and so forth, or maybe future options. But I think it's time to open the floor to questions, to comments. It is already 8:35, oh my God. So we have, unfortunately, I think we still have just 25 to 30 minutes. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, if you want to comment on what we talked about, please use the microphones, and I think it's better to collect some questions and comments. I think the gentleman over there. Yes, could you please so kind as to introduce yourself just in a few words?
Thank you Thank you very much for the talks. They were excellent and very insightful and deep. Yeah, I'm Stefan Resch, a student, doesn't matter. I have a question to Ms. Zangana. I'm wondering, what do you think is the main motivation behind the US administration for the US invasion? Is it gross incompetence, or is it really sinister scheming for shaking up the destabilization the whole area? What do you think it is?
Yes.
Especially regarding Mr. Bush, I cannot think that he's that mastermind. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Some more questions? Yes, gentleman over there.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Ismail, and if you allow me, I want to ask Ms. Haifa. Oh, okay. Yeah, first question. You know absolutely about Masoud Barzani, and he's fighting right now for Kirkuk to make statehood in Kurdistan. So if he succeeds in that and divided the country, and Kurdistan will be own country, what will be consequences to Iraq in the future and to next generation? And my second question, yesterday the Iraqi Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia, and he made the king, besides Muqtada Sadr, was in Jordanian, and he met King Abdullah. So this is the first invasion since 20 years maybe or more. So what do you think about that? Is a good positive progress or step? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Some more questions, comments? Yes, please. And if you prefer to speak in German, please, it's absolutely fine. We can translate here. Yeah.
Who is the main supporter of Daesh Islamic State and why?
Thank you. Some more.
Hi. I wanted to ask, in Libya, after the death of Gaddafi, it was really difficult to implement the new government because there were so many clans separated all over the country. And I just wanted to ask, what are the roles of the clans in all the concerning countries, and is it a big issue if you have like new government implementations?
Thank you. Maybe last one. Yes.
Hello, thank you for the speech. I just want to ask, like, if we go back to history in the, go back to history in the Middle East, all the countries, almost all of them were secular countries, and now with the like Israeli and Palestinian conflict, like they are asking for a Jewish state. Does it like affect a lot that all other states are trying to change to be more Islamic or like more religious? So like just want to hear like your comments and overview. Thank you.
Thank you. So first round.
No, I mean I'm going to comment on the secularism and the Libya question very briefly. No, I don't think, historically speaking, I mean, Haifa, in the sense of, because of the effects of the Iraqi Communist Party and the state building, yes, but we're not, this is not a trend, like secularism, the way it was definitely a product of the post-colonial state within its nationalist project. And that nationalist project, by definition, came with authoritarianism in many aspects, let alone it was never secular. I mean, there was a religious legitimacy, you know, from the king of Morocco all the way to Nasser giving speeches in Al-Azhar. So this kind of French secularism did not exist except for like the exceptions in terms of really secular, I would say, would be Tunisia and Iraq. All the rest, and Sudan at certain points. the rise of political Islam has to do with Israel, but in a very, I think, indirect sense. The failure of the post-colonial state as a resistance project, as a project of modernity in the broad sense, have led to the rise of political Islam as an alternative. Like the failure of the left, broadly speaking, have left a vacuum, and that vacuum was taken by Islamist forces. In terms of Libya, it's very interesting. I think, again, clans, just like ethnicities, exist, right? But did the Syrians have to kill each other? Did the Syrians wake up one day and kill each other based on their ethnicities? No. There was a dwindling and an evolution, an unfolding of events that leads to that. The problem in Libya is not that there is a clan system. The problem in Libya is that Gaddafi, for 40 years, have deprived the country from all kind of caliber and cadre building. People do not learn politics, cooperation, alignments, and formation in a vacuum. They learn this through a practice. When you don't have this practice for over 40 years, how do you expect people to form coalition governments, right? So it's not about clans per se, just like ethnicities in Europe being used in one historical context at a particular moment in one way, and then in a different way.
Not to mention the different interventions in Libya nowadays.
Absolutely.
By
Absolutely.
the different imperial powers.
Absolutely.
Using this so-called construction of clans. Haifa.
Yes, regarding Kurdistan and the referendum, which was something funny happening here, no? Yeah? Well, I mean, Barzani was definitely hoping that within days after the referendum and the Kurdish people voting for independence, that to declare independence. It didn't work this way. So one has to ask oneself is, why? What's happened? Has he been let down? Has he had promises more than what we know? Because in his last speech, a day before the referendum, he answered one of the journalists. He said, because the journalist said, why are you going on about this referendum while everybody else advising you to postpone it, not to do it? And he said, especially internationally, with the US, France, other countries are advising you not to do it. His reply was, well, we know what you don't know. So in that, he was indicating that he got promises that's not been declared to the public, not declared to the world. He knows better than the rest of them. And then came the result of it. You're touching on the Saudi Arabia meeting and all, but we have also to bear in mind that the Turkey position on that. A few days before or a month before, they were threatening, but they went and they signed an agreement with Iran, and they stood aside. So they pulled themselves. And immediately after that, the Iraqi Prime Minister went to Saudi Arabia, and in the presence of the Secretary of State, the US Secretary of State, they signed an agreement as well, Saudi Arabia with Iraq there. The United States itself stood aside, so not interfering, and issuing a statement saying disputed areas regarding, specifically it's about Kirkuk being the city of oil, so everybody concerned about Kirkuk, nothing else. No one was concerned about Mosul, for example, or Fallujah, but Kirkuk is the high prize of Iraq. So the Kurdish regional government thinks this is a disputed area, while actually the inhabitants of Kirkuk are almost equally divided between Kurd, Arab, and Turkoman. So hence the concern of Turkey again, because using the Turkoman as a tool in order to integrate. But wisely or knowing something we don't know, they stood aside, the United States stood aside, and Barzani was left on his own. The only country that interfered actually, and it is active on the ground now, is Iran. So one has to also question here, has Iran been led into a trap? Because if we have Saudi Arabia and the United States, and Saudi Arabia acting by proxy with the Iraqi government, and then we have Iran in the middle, and Turkey pulled out of the whole thing. And the people of, and one of the main political party, the Kurdistan PUK, the Patriotic Party itself, is supporting the whole thing. And we, for the first time also within the last few days, we heard one of the prominent figure talking about, he's saying he's actually the son, Pavel Talabani, the son of the leader of the PUK, the late leader, and he said, we were guaranteed by the United States that Kurdistan will be independent within 2 years. But Barzani messed it up. We don't know what's happened exactly. The only two countries that they were supporting him, actually France for a certain period, but Israel was fully supportive of the independence of Kurdistan. That doesn't mean that the Kurdish right, they don't have right or anything, but it's about the timing. Everybody else were questioning about the timing of it. And this, obviously, has it happened, it would have led to the fragmentation of Iraq as we know it. To the extent people started to think about, what about the Kurds in Baghdad, the Kurds in the rest of the country, because they're all over the place. What's going to happen to them? What's happening to the Arabs in the areas of Kurdistan, especially with the 5 million displaced, mainly they are present in the north of Iraq. So these are the whole complication issue. For the time being, it's now all slightly, it's unstable, it's very dangerous. It's like you have a bottle of gas next to a fire. Any minute, anything could happen. But until now, and we are really, we are down to our aspiration at the moment. We don't want to see more killing. Let's just pass this period peacefully. And that's all what we are asking for the time being.
Maybe one should add that the referendum on independence on Kurdistan was a real project by Barzani and the KDP, strongly, very strongly opposed by different other parties in the Kurdistan regional parliament. So he was the one really enforcing this kind of referendum. It's exactly on that date.
Yes. Absolutely, it's his dream. I mean, it was from the age of 16, and his father being the hero of Kurdistan, this figure of the. He's a legend. His father is a legend for the Kurds, so he thought that I can do what my father managed to do previously, and I'm going to carry that the independence, achieve it. Now the government in Iraq doesn't exist at all, but he really didn't have the right political insight. He might have been a guerrilla fighter for many years, but he's not a politician. And I think he's been cheated out. He confused friendship or promises of certain friends by that, well, the interest, political interest. And there was the clash between the two.
Just one or two sentences to the questions our colleague raised on the main motivation behind the US invasion in 2003. Do we want to go back to the issue of...
Yeah, well, it's, I think this is, there is people saying oil. It's one side of it, to provide and guarantee the security of Israel, because part of the Iraqi government is the bombardment of Israel, and that hasn't been forgiven. at all for the Iraqi government at that time, and especially for Saddam Hussein. I mean, being the person who initiated the whole thing. And we've seen it earlier in the 80s when they attacked the nuclear plant in Iraq twice. Twice in the Israelis, and they destroyed it and rebuilt again by Iraqis. So it is the security is Iraq, and also Iraq is important as a regional area, and its neighboring countries are Turkey and Iran. So it could be also a battlefield with Iran, which we've seen it's happening as well.
Yeah. So, next questions and comments. And I think it's already 10 minutes to 9, so we should speed up a bit. Yes, please.
I feel a special moment. I feel very special that in this audience, very big audience in Vienna, with a majority of young people. That's very unique. Now, Haifa Zangana, you had spoken about the governmental, non-governmental organizations. It was not always like that. You mentioned that before it was different, and now even the link with the outside world has been lost and so on. Even in Palestine, it was similar. The civil society was transformed in this vague managerial management business and so on, and lost even the ground in the country itself. Yeah. So the next step, the next expectation, perspective you can give us, especially for these young people here too, to overcome this crisis of governmental, non-government society organizations. Please, we need a new perspective and dynamic.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a quite tricky issue.
I know.
But maybe we should collect some more questions. Yeah. Yes, John, please. We have another one.
I have a short question to Raab. How do you see the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt?
Thank you. I think, yes, please. Yes, please use the microphone.
I just want to say that Rabab's point about accepting the communal association as a good thing, as a defense mechanism at the time of the dismantling of the state, or as a part of the post-colonial problem to a certain extent, is quite fresh and is interesting, because it does mean that we can probably trust communities, even though they are fragmented, tribal, religious, and so on, because they have lived before together. So they did before, without the state, have formed some forms of civil societies without being governmental. So this is almost the same as Europe in the 18th or whatever century it was, when Hegel was talking about the move from the community to civil society, but there is a need for the state. So now we have, the state has almost collapsed in many of the Arab countries. Maybe we could actually go back and trust a bit of the communities, accepting the problems with them, because they will build the non-governmental civil society organization.
Thank you. One or two more questions. It's already 5 minutes to 9. So, and we should close our event at 9 o'clock. Yes, please.
A short question. Where do you see the role of feminists now?
Thank you very much. And the last one, or two, okay, but first of all, our colleague over there.
You should stop us from going on, so we just...
So my question is to Mrs. Rabab, and Egypt has endured like a really turbulent phase, economically speaking, with the inflation, the mega projects being implemented by the regime. Where is that leading Egypt, economically speaking? Thank you.
Thank you. And a very last one.
Warum traut sich niemand, das Problem bei Name zu nennen? USA und NATO.
Oh.
Okay.
I guess that was
Yes.
for you.
NATO.
No, deal with it now.
Oh, I'm really surprised because I thought we did already talk a bit about, especially when using the term imperialism, also using and understanding the term not just as, but also as US imperialism. But nevertheless, thank you very much. I think we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we're going to be very telegraphic. So, yes, Magda, totally. Tell him and her, I'm good.
Magda is quite strict, so
yes.
we have to be in time.
Okay.
Fine.
In terms of the Brotherhood, I think at this point we're not talking about a role for the Brotherhood as an organization. They're out of the country, in prison, or killed. So if there would be a political Islamist formation, that will come afresh. This might be feeding into anything from as radical as ISIS all the way to new formulation of different kinds of secularized Islam. But the Muslim Brotherhood, as we know it, is over. In terms of feminists, I would use this in the plural. There is not one kind of feminists. There are the pro-state, pro-regime, pro-colonial, the ones who support Sisi, the ones who support the Brotherhood, and everything in between. But I think there is a very interesting feminist project that took shape, again, with the Arab uprising, whereby you see day in and day out regular average Egyptians speaking out against sexual harassment, speaking out against patriarchal dynamics in the family and in the workplace. And classically speaking, the usual suspects to do this were the lefties, you know, the ones with the big hair like myself and chain smoking, right? But your average Egyptians who you would actually pass them down the street and think of, oh my God, she's veiled and oppressed, right? No, those are the majority of Egyptians, and those are the majority who are actually formulating that feminist project, but a very localized feminist project that doesn't take issue with religion per se, but take issue with patriarchal interpretations within the family, within the state, and whatnot. Again, it remains to be organized because they closed down all the feminist organization along with every other organization we know of. So that's a small caveat to that. Yeah, they're allowing us to start afresh. In terms of the economic projects, you're absolutely right. I mean, both fiscally in terms of liquidity and resources, and economically in terms of an economic vision, zilch. I mean, the mega projects in terms of the new capital and whatnot are just, you know, driving us to the bottom of it. But what that means is that there is more of a fragility to the existing regime, because unlike the Nasserite regime, for example, that had a socio-economic project, you know, anything from industrialization to social mobility, this one has nothing and can't keep it afloat. The only problem is that this comes at a very high cost. And so far, there hasn't been an alternative vision in government, so to speak.
Right. Regarding NGOs, not all of them are really as bad as you might have thought. either in Iraq or in Palestine. Though, I mean, the important issue is to check on, it's about corruption. Corruption is there, and also it's the agenda of those organizations. It needs to be checked as well. We've seen in Iraq before election of 2004 as the sprouting of 5,000 organizations. A lot of them were women organizations. They were immediately before the election. Most of them disappeared 2 months after the election. So we need to question what's going on, what's happening to those. How come all these organizations disappeared, and who been funding them? Who is the source? And one of my colleagues, a fantastic professor in Toronto, Shahrazad Mujab, wrote really good book on a paper regarding this, and she called it Follow the Dollar. Follow the money. So when you follow the money, you know what's going on, what's happening. That doesn't mean all of them are that, because there are initiatives, there are people. I've been working with many of them in Palestine, and some of them in Iraq, and others in Tunisia, and they are genuinely making difference. An important issue what's being raised about the community. If it is really built up, based within the community, people trust it, because we do that. We follow each other. We know who is who and what, and we can check on that from one person to another. So I hope this is hopeful enough. Yeah, young people.
Yes, and this, hopefully, yes. Yeah. And we will see. This kind of NGOization is for sure not a complete one, neither in Palestine nor in Iraq. Yeah. And that also leads to the question or the possibility to reopen a space of political actions by different social initiatives, by social movements in future as well. I think we have to close. Unfortunately, we have to close. Our event already. It is 9:05. Magda is quite strict when it comes to the issue of time. So thank you so much for coming to Vienna, for joining this event, for giving us such a deep impression and a deep picture of.
Thank you. We should remind them of the books.
Yes. Haifa told me I should remind you this one. You know already.